Man, this is so good to be here. Was that not amazing at the beginning? Was that not like the absolute best? If we could do it over again, I would have that happen after the message, because like expectations are here and they're only going down. So hey, I am so glad to be with you this morning. I am so glad you're here. I hope you excuse our mess in the lobby, in the children's area. We are undergoing a renovation right now, and you can actually poke your, there you go, thank you. You can poke your head into the children's area and see kind of what's going on and a rough outlook of what it's going to look like. We're just so thrilled to be here to celebrate Easter. And this is one of the things that I think is always interesting. We don't always know how to celebrate Easter. Like we get how to celebrate Christmas. Like Christmas, you do like the presents, you sing songs. We've got Christmas songs. We do that. You go to whatever family tradition you have. And so we kind of get all the Christmas stuff. If you walk past someone on the street, it's okay. You can just go like, Merry Christmas. And they may not say Merry Christmas back, but they at least like know that it's a greeting. Easter isn't like that. Like, so in church history, for some of you, I'm going to teach you something here. For a long time in the church, one of the things that people have done on Easter is one person has said, He has risen. He has risen. There you go. Some of you know it. So one person says, He has risen, and then the other person says, He has risen. There you go. Why don't you practice with your neighbor? Go ahead, tell your neighbor. One of you can figure out who does the He has risen. Do it right now. Get used to it. You got it. But you can't do that walking by the street. Like some of you are like, you'll go out to eat after this, and you can't like go to the cashier at the end. You can't be like, He has risen. And they'll be like, yes. Thank you. Like it doesn't work within that. And like we don't always know what to do. So like it's Easter, so some of us get dressed up a little more than other times. Some of us dress in really bright colors. Like honestly, right now, from my view, you all look like a bunch of dyed Easter eggs in the carton right now. That's kind of my view right now. And we do that. Like, do any parents get your kids Easter baskets? You do the Easter basket thing? Yeah. I tried to convince my wife that because of the empty tomb, it was more symbolically significant for their baskets to be empty. She didn't buy it, my kids didn't buy it, so I kind of lost that bet. But like we don't always understand how to celebrate Easter. And then this is the thing that we always ask on Easter. So we have this moment in history in which Jesus rose from the grave, in which an ordinary man was crucified and his followers scattered because they assumed he was dead. And then when word got out that he had rose back, like they didn't believe it right away. They needed, just like any single one of us, like if someone you loved had passed away and someone told you they came back from the dead, like how would you respond? No. Like, no, I need to see him. I need to touch him. And that was the same way with his followers. Like they needed to see him. They needed to put their hands where the nails were in order to believe. And then they're completely changed. And so we have this like just world altering event. And then we get to Easter Sunday and we always ask this question. So what does Easter have to do with my life? Which, could I just be clear? That is the weirdest question to ask. Like we have this event that changed everything. And then we go, what's the personal application for my life? Like think of moments in history in which the world all of a sudden was different. You didn't ask what the personal application was. Like no one said like, say for instance, like when we found out the world was round and it wasn't flat. Or when we landed on the moon. Or to appeal to the younger generation, Doritos Locos Tacos. Yeah, you guys are with me now. You're like, wait. The Dorito is the shell, Cool Ranch, nacho cheese, and fiery, something, I don't know what the last one is. Like world-altering events. But say it like this, parents, think of the time when you had your first kid and you have that moment where, this was my panic moment, where you're like in the hospital and they give you the kid and then you put the kid in the back of your car in a appropriate restraining harness. I don't want anyone to think I was putting my baby in the trunk, okay? Like, you put them in their car seat back there, and you just feel like, really? Like, now they just let me go? Like, I had to sign more papers to get a TV at Best Buy than to get this child. Like, I know it's mine, but do you guys want to do a background check or something? Like, I feel like there's another step in the process that we're missing here. But like, you have this kid, and I never once said, like, now that we had a kid, I never once said, how does this apply to my life? How does this change? Like, it just does. It was significant, and so you begin to form your life around it. And so all of a sudden, it changes your spending habits and your sleeping habits and your social schedule and everything else, because this significant thing that has happened, and now the world is different. And so you go, okay, so how is my life different because of this? And the resurrection is the exact same way, but we always pause and we go back and we go, yeah, but how does this apply to me? So here's the deal. Because that's the question we typically ask, and you're all here, and I have 27 minutes and 47 seconds left on the clock. Don't worry about that, because I don't usually abide by it, just as a heads up, okay? I don't want anyone like, oh, he's over. Yeah, get over it. Because that's the question we typically ask, we'll go ahead and answer it this morning. What does the resurrection have to do with me? How does the resurrection apply to my life? And if you have your Bible with you, we're going to be in Luke chapter 23 this morning. If you don't have your Bible with you, you can use the one in the pew in front of you. If you don't have one at all, that's our gift to you. Or I really want to encourage you, if you have your phone with you, you can go to bcnazarene.org/gatherings, and we will have all the scriptures and sermon notes within there, and we will have an act of faith this morning that we're giving you an excuse to pull out your phone and that you're not on Facebook the entire during the message, trusting you not to lie, because we're in church after all. Am I right? So you can go to any of those. And as you're heading there, there's something that we need to, an idea that we need to explore. And that is the fact that as we have this conversation on Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, on his life and then death and life again, is the fact is that there is something about death that we don't understand, that we grasp about life. Like, there are things about death that we don't seem to comprehend that are very inconsistent because we fully understand them about life. And let me tell you, the first time I caught on to this idea, I think I was a sophomore in high school, around then. It was the first time that I watched the movie Monty Python in the Search for the Holy Grail. There we go, there's some of you. Yeah, my wife says that it's stupid, and I tell her, but it's brilliant stupidity. Like, I'm not disagreeing that it's stupid, but it's brilliant stupidity. And so for those of you who are judging me, I remind you, judge not lest you be judged. Amen. So I'm watching the movie, and my favorite scene in the movie, I think it's the second scene in the movie, is there's this man, he's walking through a village, and he's pushing a cart, and there's all these bodies in the cart, and the limbs are hanging off, and he's pushing the cart, and he's yelling, do you know what he's yelling? Bring out your dead. And so he's walking down the village, and over again, he's just yelling, bring out your dead. And so people are coming in, and they're throwing their dead people in the cart, and it's somewhat of a morbid and comical situation as a whole. And this one guy is carrying someone kind of fireman style, and he goes to throw him in, and the guy's like, oh, he's not dead yet. And the guy's response, he goes, oh, no, he's mostly dead. And that phrase is just the funniest phrase to me. Like, he's mostly dead. And so they have a back and forth. He goes, he's going to be dead by morning. He's going to stink. He bops him on the head. He puts him in the cart. Not important to the plot of the story. But I just thought that phrase of like that pause within there of he's mostly dead. That's hilarious. Because we understand you can't be mostly dead. Like, you're either dead or you're not dead. There's not like degrees of death. You're either kind of in or out. It's one or the other. And so this idea of he's mostly dead is comical. Now, a couple weeks ago, I'm driving through Centerville, and I passed a yoga studio. I did not go in because that's not really my thing, but I drove past a yoga studio, and the title of the yoga studio was Fully Alive Yoga. Not alive yoga, not lively yoga. It was the distinction, this is fully alive yoga. And I thought, this is weird. How can you not be mostly dead, but you can be fully alive? And this is how we talk, and this is how we think. That we assume that there are different degrees of life. That life is kind of on a sliding scale. And yet death is a destination. You're either in or you're out. You're dead or you're not dead. But there's different degrees of life. It even resonates with the way that we speak. Think of it in terms of how we speak. It's not just life and not life. You can be fully alive. You can be full of life. A difficult circumstance can suck the life out of you. A good circumstance could breathe new life into you. If you get in an accident, you need the jaws of life. You could be in the prime of your life, or if you're scared, you could have the living daylight scared out of you. Now look at this. The way we talk about life is we talk about life as if there's all different degrees, and we talk about death as a destination, that it's either one or the other. But I actually don't think that's accurate. I think we need to begin to understand that death has degrees. Now, this is when I really started to see this. So this is a little over a year ago. My oldest, Maddie, she came home from school. And Maddie is one of the most extroverted kids I have ever met in my entire life. Like, she loves people. Like, she loves people to the point that my wife and I were concerned that we weren't providing a stable enough home life. Because like every single night she'd be like, whose house are we going to? Who's coming over? I'm like, we're just gonna hang here as a family. Oh. I expected this when you're 14, but it's 5. I was a little unprepared. And so that's just she just loves people. And she loved going to school. She thought school was amazing because there's people at the school. And she thought that was the best thing ever. And so she'd come home, she'd be tired someday, she'd be worn out, but she always loved it. And then one day she came home from school and she was different. And so we started asking her questions, started asking her what was going on. And every parent knows how that conversation goes. How's school? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. Now that's not true. You didn't actually do nothing. Tell me something that you did. But it was like the conversation was different. And so we kept asking questions and we kept prying. And this may not sound like a big deal to us because we're adults and we've been there. But my daughter had, for probably the first time in her life, gotten really embarrassed in front of her friends that morning. It was the first time that she had been humiliated. And now for some of us, that's not that big of a deal. Like for me, that kind of happens every Sunday on a Sunday morning. Like I come down from the stage and someone goes, do you realize what you said? I said, what? Yeah, you said that. Do you think I should write a formal apology to the congregation? Like, nah, they're probably used to it. You'll do it again next week. Okay, good. Cool. So like some of us are used to it, but she had never experienced that before. And so we told her what you usually tell someone. Get over it. You'll be fine. You'll bounce back. It'll be okay. And she did. A couple days later, like she was fine. She was going back to school as she normally did before. But something within her was different now. There was an innocence that was lost in that moment. There was a freedom that would never quite be the same. There was a joy in what she did that, to be honest with you, to this day still has not been recaptured. And I don't have words to explain it other than this, but something within my daughter died that day. That there was a part of an innocence and a freedom and a joy and excitement for life, a security in just being who she was, that all of a sudden in that moment was ripped out of her. And there was a part of her that died that day. Now here's my guess, is you've experienced something like that. You've maybe been in a job that you thought would fully harness your ability and your intellect and your creativity that wasn't. And instead of being this exciting journey over and over again, it slowly sucked the life out of you. Or you've been in a relationship that instead of being healthy and building you up and helping you become the person who you were created to be, you found it to be toxic. And it slowly sapped the life out of you. Or another example that I see often is sometimes people get sick and it does not just affect them physically, it affects them spiritually. And their spirit dies long before their body actually gets to its most critical points. And I don't have words to explain it other than this, that sometimes death gets a hold of our life. And what we need to see is that not only does life have degrees, but death has degrees as well. Now let's be honest for a second. There are parts of us that need to die. Like there are parts of us that need to go. Those of you sitting next to your spouse or parents, they could probably tell you pretty quickly what that is. Like there are parts of our arrogance that they need to die. There may be parts of competitiveness or desire to identify ourselves with our belongings or this constant desire for more things and more experiences. Like those things need to die. But there's some other parts of us that were never meant to. The part of you that hopes, the part of you that prays, the part of you that dreams, that part was never meant to die. And what's happened for many of us as adults is we have traded in these wild imaginations that we had as children and these epic dreams of what our life would become, and we've traded them in for dreams of a vacation or remodeling our kitchen. And I just want to inform you that's a really, really bad trade. And what has happened is that through the difficulty, through the stress, through the friction of life that we continuously go through, these things that were never meant to die have died. And death has gotten its grip on our life. And we explain it away. We go, oh, it's no big deal. It happens. I'll get over it. And then we do about the only thing that we can think to do is we try to self-help our way out of it, thinking that if I can just be efficient enough or learn certain skills or know how to win friends and influence people, that somehow death will get rid of its hold on our life. And the reality is this, is that when we're in that moment, we cannot self-help our way out of it. What we need is a resurrection. Amen. And I've got good news for you. One is offered to you. And that's the passage that we're going to look at this morning. So in this passage, in Luke chapter 23, what we see a conversation take place between Jesus and two criminals as he is being crucified on the cross. We need to understand that in the first century, crucifixion was a common form of execution in their day. And while the Roman government self-admittedly found no charges against Jesus, that he had done no wrong, these two other men, we can assume, have done some significant crimes that would cause them to be executed. And while Jesus is on the cross with these men, and they are all three quite literally physically dying, we see a conversation unfold, and this is what takes place. Verse 32. It says, two others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with him. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross. And the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. I think that phrase is fascinating. If we could pause there for a sec. Jesus offers forgiveness without anyone requesting it. This is one of the great delusions that we don't understand about forgiveness that holds us up in many spots in our lives, is we assume in order for forgiveness to be given, it must be requested. Like, I can't forgive them because they never said they're sorry. How can I forgive them if they haven't requested forgiveness? That's what Jesus shows us in this moment. You can offer forgiveness without it being requested. You don't have to be held captive to the inflictions from someone else on your life. You can choose to forgive them without them ever saying they're sorry. And he shows us something else here in this moment, is that forgiveness can be extended without it being accepted. It can be given without it actually being received, which is what makes forgiveness absolutely so amazing. Is it's probably the only good thing in our entire world that is continuously offered without it being accepted. Like, think of how many things are offered to you that you don't want, that you don't accept. So some of you, your Easter tradition is you're going to leave the service and you're going to go have lunch, or this is 11 o'clock. People before had brunch, lunch, or Easter dinner with your family. Think about all the advice you're going to get in the hours that ensue before you. And you're not going to ask for it. You're not going to request it in any way. You don't have to receive it because it's not good, but you're going to be given it advice anyway. So this past week, I took my car to get serviced. They did a wonderful job on my car. I assume it runs. I don't really know much about that thing. So I took my car to get serviced, but I got enormous amounts of advice from the dealership. So it started, I walked in and I was wearing a pair of shoes that were white. And the guy who was taking my information down, he said, "Those are really white shoes." And I almost said thank you, and then I realized that wasn't actually a compliment. It was just an observational statement. "Those are really white shoes." So I looked at him and I said, "Yes," because I didn't know what else to do. And then when I went to pick up my car at the end, they were letting me know the car was done. And so they come out and I hear, and I've heard this my whole life because I have 2 first names. I understand that. I didn't name myself. And it would have been awkward if they named my first name a last name. But that's another story. And so a lady comes out to tell me my car's ready. And she goes, Jack, Kevin? Kevin, Jack? Jack, Kevin? I was like, yeah, that's me. She goes, you know you have 2 first names. I said, yeah, I do. I usually just spell the last one when someone asks. That way they don't think I'm confused. But yeah, I do. And then she goes, you know you can get that changed. Thank you. I do. Offered, not received. Maybe one of the only good things. Although the other one would be my uncle, who apparently has a great deal of wealth, and he keeps offering it to me, but I haven't gotten it yet. He is a Nigerian prince. I may need to go to Ancestry.com because I don't think I have much Nigerian in me, but I'll let you decide that. So it said, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowd watched and the leaders scoffed. He saved others, they said. Let him save himself if he is really God's Messiah, the chosen one. These people had seen Jesus perform miracles. They'd seen him do signs and wonders. And so they are all gathered together to see if Jesus will let himself down from the cross. To see if Jesus will perform another miracle and spare his own life, not understanding that he was not there by accident, that he purposefully went to die so that our relationship with God could be restored. It says, see if he was really God's Messiah, the chosen one. Verse 36, the soldiers mocked him too by offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. A sign was fastened above him with these words, this is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals, this is where it gets important, verse 39. One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, so you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself and us too while you're at it. This is what I think is fascinating about this man's response. Is while he is on a cross that will be the scene of his own death, he chooses to hurl insults at Jesus instead of moving towards healing. And isn't that just how most of us live? Even though we're backed into a corner and everything has gone wrong and so many decisions have been taken out of our hands, we would choose to continue to multiply the pain for those around us, rather than move to a position of healing. Let me show you what it looks like. Your boss yells at you at work. Instead of forgiving him in your heart, without him requesting forgiveness, you go home, and what do? Yell at your kids. Yell at your family. Instead of absorbing and moving towards healing, we multiply the way that death has its grip on us. And we pass it on to others. It doesn't just sit steady in our hearts, it moves to those around us. I have a 5-year-old who is unbelievably competitive. She takes certain activities, simple activities, and she turns them into gruesome events in which there is no other path other than win and lose. And if she loses, it ruins the rest of her day because she is so competitive. Where did she get that? Verse 40. It says, but the other criminal protested. Now I want you to get this scene. This is important. So we've already heard Jesus is crucified in the middle. One is on his left, the other is on his right. And so this man who is on Jesus's right, he actually has to look around Jesus to address the other criminal who he can hear hurling insults at Jesus. It says, but the other criminal protested. Don't you fear God? Even when you have been sentenced to die, we deserve to die for our crimes. But this man hasn't done anything wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. This is what I think is so fascinating. Is there are so many things that this man doesn't understand. He doesn't understand why Jesus had to die. Like he doesn't grasp that. He probably doesn't understand in this moment that Jesus will rise from the grave, that this is not Jesus' final word, but that he will defeat death in this moment. I'm sure he doesn't understand the way in which Jesus was the fulfillment of all the prophecies that took place in Scripture before him, how his signs and his miracles continuously pointed to the fact that he was going to be a part of a kingdom that would start here on earth and would last forever in eternity with God in heaven through paradise. Like, I'm sure this man doesn't grasp any of that. And he does grasp a couple simple things. He owns his own death. He owns the way in which he has done wrong, that death has its grip on its heart, and he has contributed to the death that is going on in the world. He owns his own death, and he asks Jesus for help. That's it. That's all this man does. I am willing to own the death that is in my life, and I need your help. Verse 43, and Jesus replied, I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise. I want to ask you a question, and then we'll come back to this. Don't worry about raising your hands or anything like that. Just process this yourself. I'm curious as to how many of you have at different points in your life been told to get over it. So here's my guess, is that you went through a difficult circumstance, a painful situation. You went through an event or an experience that really just kind of locked you in, that grabbed hold of your life, that put you in a different spot, in a different situation that you couldn't really move past. And someone who was well-meaning, someone who may be kind and good-hearted, who wanted what was best for you, saw you stuck in your spot, or maybe just was sick of hearing you talk about it, came over to you and told you at some point in time, you just need to get over it. Why don't we practice? Let's see how this returns. Turn to your neighbor, tell them, get over it. Oh, there was lots of laughter. Here's what I'm guessing. Some of you couples on your way to church maybe had a little fight, a little tiff, and you just got the luxury of looking at your spouse and telling them, get over it. And I have just multiplied the pain and death in your life. I apologize, my bad, that's on me, okay? I'll own that one. How many of you found that helpful? How many of you went, man, I feel better, that's great. But that's what we do. We just tell people to get over it because we don't know another option. You say, yes, you have this difficulty. Yes, death has got its grip on your life. Just get over it. Just move on. Just deal with it. Just live with it. That's what the rest of us do. So today, we're starting a new series. And this is what we do here at BCN, is about 70% of the time on a Sunday morning, we're in series. And by being in a series, this gives us an opportunity to take a more in-depth, intense look at a topic, to understand its roots, and to see how it affects how we live our lives and how it shapes how we conduct our relationships and everything that we do. And then we have a good portion of our church meets in small groups throughout the week. And one of the things they do is they discuss the message and how it applies to them individually. But it's more than that. They meet for friendship and for accountability and for support and for relationships. And so about 70% of the time we're in series. And so today we're starting a new series, and the title of the series is Don't Get Over It. Because while the most common advice that we get from others is to get over it, we don't think that's the best option. We don't think that's what you're supposed to do. That rather than get over it, there's another alternative, in that we are supposed to move through it. That there's a better way of living. And over the next 4 weeks, starting with today, we're talking about forgiveness. And what you're going to see if you're a part of this, you're going to see not just some practical applications and some boundaries and some rules that we should all set for our own lives as to how to have healthy relationships. You're going to hear some incredible stories of people who have experienced forgiveness and extended forgiveness to others. And so we're going to continue this on next week. But it may seem kind of odd as to why we would spend 4 weeks looking to the Bible for stories of forgiveness, because there are some weird accounts in Scripture when it comes to forgiveness. I want to show you one of them. This is in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 14. It says this. Oh, I'm looking the wrong way. Let me look at it. There you go. You see. It says this. The priest will then take some of the blood of the guilt offering and apply it to the lobe of the right ear, the thumb of the right hand, and the big toe of the right foot of the person being purified. That's weird, right? Could we all acknowledge that's weird? So like thousands of years ago in their culture, when someone needed forgiveness, the priest would take the blood of an animal and put it on someone's right earlobe, right thumb, and right big toe. Gross. And that's how they did it. But this is what was happening. While we look at that and we go, oh, that's so weird. Let me tell you what's even weirder. Get over it. Looking at someone who has experienced significant pain and is in a difficult spot in their life and telling them, you just need to get over it. Because this is what's happening in the book of Leviticus, is what they were doing is someone who had committed an offense, they were marking them. They were marking them that this person had been forgiven. And that they may have experienced something that was inflicted upon them. Or they may have done something that contributed to the spiritual death of someone around them. And they're saying, no, this will not have a hold on you in your life. This will not define you. And they were marking this person that they had a new life before them and they would not be known by the offenses of their past. So a couple weeks ago, I was on YouTube and I stumbled across this speech by Robert Downey Jr. And the speech was absolutely amazing. For those of you who don't identify actors well, like every time I watch a movie with my wife, she goes, what were they in? Where are they from? Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, if that helps a little bit. So watching a speech of Iron Man without the costume, and he was being presented this award. And he began to tell the story of his own history and his own failures. That, and we won't get into specific details, but Robert Downey Jr. has had some significant personal and moral failures in his own life. So much so to the point that the Hollywood community kind of blacklisted him and refused to cast him in roles. And I just want to say, like, when the Hollywood community has blacklisted you for your personal moral failures, like, that's something. That's another message for another day, but that's something right there. And so he was being presented the award by his friend Mel Gibson. And he explains to the audience, at the point in time, Mel Gibson was going through some significant personal and moral public failures. And Robert Downey Jr. says, I want to explain to you why I had Mel present me this award. When I was being pushed aside, and when the only thing that was in the media was my mistakes and my faults and my failures, Mel took me in. He put a roof over my head. He put food on the table. He actually cast me in a role that was written for him. And he told me this, that if I would have faith and if I would own what I had done wrong, he said, Mel Gibson called it hugging the cactus. He said, if I would hug the cactus, then I would experience forgiveness and I could move forward with my life. And he said the only thing that Mel asked him to do is to pass it on to the next person. And so Robert Downey Jr. said, I'm sure Mel would not have guessed that the next person would be him or the next time would be tonight. But we are all aware of the failures of my friend, and he has hugged the cactus long enough. And so it's time that we let my friend continue his career and do not hold him to the sins of his past. This is what Robert Downey Jr. was doing in that moment. He was marking his friend as forgiven. He was doing the exact same thing that they did in the book of Leviticus, of instead of looking at the community and saying, get over it, instead of looking at his friend and saying, get over it, he understood that we need to be marked so our lives can move forward. And so this is what we understand, is that death may have gotten its hold on your life. And there's a part of you that may have died that was never meant to. But this is what I want you to see and why the resurrection matters to us, is that through the cross, you have been marked. You've been marked as forgiven. Amen. And you do not need to own the failures of your past. You do not need to live in the shadow of your own mistakes. And you need to know in this moment that a new life is offered to you. And you don't need blood spread on your earlobe and your thumb or your big toe as a sign of it. You don't need a speech by Robert Downey Jr. on your behalf, as cool as that would be, in order for everyone to know that you have been marked. I want you to know this, you have been marked. And if you will own the death in your own life, and if you will ask God to release you from it, that resurrection will take place in your own heart, in your own life. That you will not have to pay the penalty for your own sins. And the power of sin is removed from your life, and your relationship with God is restored in this moment so you can move forward in the life that God designed for you. So I want to explain to you exactly what's going to happen. The band is going to come out. Literally, like right now. Did you see that? That cue was amazing. The band is going to come out. We're going to sing a song together. The title of the song is "Oh Come to the Altar." This song is about not moving physically forward to the altar. It's about moving to a place of decision in our own lives and our own hearts. And what's going to happen is we're going to sing a verse, a chorus, a verse, and 2 more choruses. And then I'm going to come back up, and I'm going to invite you to accept Jesus as the center of your life. And if you have never made that decision, if death has gotten hold of you and you say, I need resurrection, we're going to invite you to have that right here this morning. And what's going to take place is we're all going to be standing together, and I'm going to pray a prayer, and you're just going to have to repeat after me out loud. You're not praying it to me, you're praying it to God, but we say it out loud because Scripture says that if we believe in our heart and confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord, that we will be saved. And you're not going to have to pray this by yourself. This is the amazing thing that's going to happen, is everyone around you who's already made this decision in their life is going to pray it with you as a confirmation of our own faith and as an encouragement to you. And so I want to encourage you this morning, if you have never made that decision, if death has gotten hold of your life, and you may not have all your questions answered, you may not have it all figured out, but you're at least willing to say, God, I need you. I want resurrection, to make that decision this morning. And so I invite you, could we all stand together as we sing the first lines of these songs?